So the foundation of communication should start relationally. When you remain relational, you choose to value the relationship between you and your child over the problem that needs to be solved, over the challenge that has presented itself, over the circumstances.
In Hebrew, that word for relationship, it's hesed, right? And it's used over 250 times in the Old Testament.
I think it's really hard for us to understand really what it means in our language. You've heard it described as love. I believe it has an attachment to God. So it's not just love, because I think our words for love even are confusing. I've heard it referred to, I think in the Gospel Project, as sticky love. You know, it's a love that you cannot shake, that's unconditional. It's a love that simply does not go away, no matter how annoying or rebellious we are, or how much pain we cause our Heavenly Father. That's the kind of love that God has for us, and that's the kind of love that we need to have as a parent for our child.
So what are some of the strategies that we use to build that attachment, that sticky love?
Yeah, you know, even if we know that we're feeling that attachment, we have that love, oftentimes we're not communicating that.
Absolutely.
And so when I think of a strategy, honestly, Marcus Warner talks about this acronym, and I don't know if you're getting older and you forget things easily, but the acronyms help me a lot. It's CAKE, CAKE, and C tells us to start with curiosity. So when we're communicating with our child or our young adult, they don't like to be called child as much these days. When we're communicating with our young adult or teen, we need to first start with questions. That's what he means by curiosity. We need to first come to them asking about where they are, what are they experiencing. We're understanding what they are coming with in the conversation.
Jesus did a really good job of asking questions.
Yeah. So we're checking in. We're asking those questions. We're not being sarcastic. So sarcasm is the opposite of curiosity. Sarcasm has it has a cut in the way that it's delivered. And so oftentimes I've seen parents, and I know we've been guilty of this, that we're trying to be funny or maybe even more of a friend to our child. And so we use sarcasm to really say what we want to say, but we're too afraid to say. So it's like a manipulative, guilt-inducing way of saying it.
And I think there were even times where we would ask questions expecting a certain type of answer based on how we asked the question.
Yeah, honestly, I've asked questions before trying to draw out a certain answer, and then when I don't get it, then the sarcasm comes in, or just I'm just, my agenda is revealed. Yeah. I realize that I'm not really listening to understand. I'm listening to get them to go somewhere in their thoughts.
Yeah. I knew that her intention in asking it was never to make me feel bad about what I was doing. It's just the way that it was delivered, I think. And so, you know, she would often ask it like, have you fed your spirit today? Or did you do this first? And, you know, I get the basis is that she wants me to be feeding my spirit, and there's nothing wrong with watching or playing these games, but, you know, making it a priority to feed my spirit first before doing it. And so I think she was doing her best to say it as loving as possible and asking me the question, not telling me, go do this. I think she wanted to avoid looking like a dictator and get me thinking. But to me, it seemed like it was the opposite way. Her asking it was her condemning almost.
So after C is A in the acronym CAKE, and A stands for appreciation. So we talked about the verse that talks about being joyful, be thankful. So we are as parents are supposed to be emotionally mature enough that we can always be grateful in every situation. We can find something to thank the Lord in, and that's something that we really need to model to our children. Hopefully our life experience and our own spiritual maturity is developing in us a resiliency and an ability to find joy, and how we find it is through gratitude. That's also how we abide in the Spirit, is through gratitude.
Mm-hmm. And that is a critical component to building a healthy family identity, one that is Christ-centered, is really showing that we do appreciate each other, not for what they do, not for what we do, but who we are in relationship to each other.
Right. Appreciation really does attract. Think about that. Mm-hmm. It attracts them to bond with us as parents, and it attracts them to bond with the Lord. Mm-hmm. Resentment, that's the opposite. It repels. So when we're weaving in, first with curiosity, we're trying to understand where they are, and then appreciation, we're trying to remind them of who they are. We're appreciating the character qualities that God has given them as a child of God. We're appreciating the things that they contribute to the family with their presence sometimes. And again, if we can focus less on the behavior and more about their character, that's essential. The third thing that we need to consider when we're communicating with our children after appreciation is kindness. So we've started with curiosity. Mm-hmm. We express appreciation for who they are and how God views them. And then we get to kindness. So what does kindness look like as a parent to a child?
Yeah, kindness is expressed. That's the tone that we deliver, right? That is when we are talking to our children and that tone is delivering a certain acceptance of who they are as individuals, not just what they do. Kindness really does cultivate joy in that family, in relationship.
I think kindness also makes way to compassion, mm-hmm. which makes way to empathy. For them to feel that we can stop what we're thinking or what we're experiencing, and step into what they are experiencing, and kind of it starts with kindness.
Yeah, there have definitely been times when I was hurting that I know my parents met me in that pain. One of the biggest ones was when I was in 8th grade. One of my friends died, and it was really hard, and I've never, up until that point, I'd never seen my dad cry. And they told me what had happened, and I just immediately walked out of the room because I just didn't know what to do with myself, especially that young. And you don't expect. You think you're invincible at that age, right? But I just sat on my bed and I cried. And my mom was already crying, but my dad walked in and he just sat on my bed and cried with me. He didn't say anything. He just sat there and cried with me. And they just gave me the space to grieve. They weren't hovering all of the time. They gave me space, but I always knew that they were there with me in that pain.
The last one is E. So we have C, curiosity, A, appreciation, K for kindness, and E, envelope conversations. I know. What does that mean?
Yeah, so many times we focus on the issue.
The presenting problem, right?
The presenting problem, when we forget about the past and we forget about, or we don't focus enough on the future. They are not necessarily known by this issue. Right.
It's our ability as a parent to help them see outside of themselves or help them see outside of their circumstances right now. You know, when your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed, the right now is everything. The feeling is everything. It can be consuming. And when we envelope conversations, we start by reassuring them, and those kinds of things. We remind them of the history of how God has been faithful before. Mm-hmm. And then we discuss what's happening now, and then we end with how God is trustworthy and He will always be faithful in the future. Again, we're counting on the character of God. That's really how we envelope conversations, is we start with who God is and how He's always, kept His promises in the past. and then we end with how he's going to keep his promises in the future. It's like weaving in hope in the muck of the problem. So really, when we do that, we have a strategy in how we communicate in a way that keeps us relational. All of those elements are what help us stay relational in a conversation that's often about something really difficult.
And many of us really like cake, so it's pretty easy to remember.
Okay, you like cake, we get it. So remaining relational, that's like super easy for you, right?
No. Sometimes I just want to focus on the problem instead of understanding where they're coming from.
Yeah, we want to fix the problem. We're like, child in pain, must fix it so the child can stop being in pain, right?
Absolutely.
You know, there are certain red flags that can indicate to us that maybe we aren't communicating in a relational way, or we need to wait to communicate until we can realign and be relational. So one of the first signs is that we don't want to be around someone we normally love to be around. That might mean that there's like a switch in us that has not switched on in our relational skills.
And sometimes you just want the person to go away. Just leave me alone.
Yeah, real timing is a huge part of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, and a child doesn't understand that. We as a parent, we have to be sure that we're asking ourselves, okay, am I having a problem even being in the same room with my child at this point? Because if I'm having a problem doing that, then I'm probably not going to communicate with him or her in a relational way.
Yeah, and even sometimes we just get hyper-focused on one specific issue.
Another red flag is that your mind is locked on something upsetting. If your child tells you something that deeply disturbs you, and they continue to speak and you've not heard anything that they're saying, you're not able to fully listen, and all you can do is think about the upsetting information you heard before, that's an indication that you're probably not going to continue to communicate in a relational manner.
So when we're not being relational, we tend to become aggressive in the way that we interrogate, judge, or we're just trying to fix our kids or fix the situation.
Yeah. Well, again, when we are just beeline for the solution to a problem, the message that's received is you no longer matter. Just having no pain is what matters. Even no pain for the child, but the child needs to know that they can experience pain and still be okay. And when we focus on just the problem and we don't remain relational, we're not enforcing the resiliency of who they are in Christ and how Christ can get them through any situation.
And I know, even personally, you know, another red flag is when we're not making eye contact. I get so hyper-focused on the problem or the issue or the pain that I find myself almost looking past them.
Yeah. Or you know how when we're thinking, we'll look up or look to the side, because honestly, that indicates that we're not listening anymore. We're thinking about what we're going to say. So lack of eye contact is a huge indication that we're not being relational, or we're at least not relating enough.
And I think the last one that comes to mind for me is when we feel like it's their fault that something happened, or that they have this issue or this struggle. So
we're trying to assign blame instead of actually being present with the child and helping the child process what's happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's try to pay attention to those signs so we can stay relational.